Hey there, peaceful soul. Before we begin tonight's gentle journey through Scripture, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from right now and what time it is in your corner of creation. Please leave a comment below sharing this. It's always such a blessing to see how God's Word brings rest to hearts across every time zone. Now take a deep breath and let's rest in God's presence. The Sea of Galilee rested in quiet splendour as the day's light began its gentle retreat toward the horizon. Golden rays stretched across the water's surface, dancing and shimmering as if heaven itself had scattered coins across the deep. It had been a full day, a day when crowds pressed in from every direction, hungry for wisdom, for healing, for a glimpse of this man who spoke as no one had spoken before. Jesus had been teaching since morning, his voice carrying across the gathered multitudes. He spoke of seeds falling on different soils, of tiny mustard seeds growing into sheltering trees, of hidden treasures and precious pearls. The kingdom of heaven, he said, was like these things, sometimes hidden, always valuable, growing in ways the human eye might miss. His words were simple yet profound, accessible yet mysterious, and the crowds hung on every syllable. But even the Son of God wrapped in human flesh grew weary. As the sun began its descent, Jesus looked out at his disciples with eyes that held both exhaustion and purpose. "Let us go over to the other side," he said simply. No fanfare accompanied these words, no dramatic declaration, just a quiet invitation to cross the sea. This is where our meditation begins tonight, with this small, seemingly unremarkable statement. Let us go over to the other side. 5 ordinary words that carried extraordinary meaning. For when Jesus says, "Let us go," he already knows what lies ahead. The storm that would soon rage was not a surprise to him. The fear that would grip his disciples' hearts was already known. The peace he would speak was already prepared. The disciples, eager to follow their teacher wherever he led, began to prepare the boat. Some of them were fishermen by trade: Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Their hands calloused and strong from years of casting nets and pulling oars. They knew this sea intimately, had crossed its waters countless times. This evening crossing seemed unremarkable to them, simply another journey in their extraordinary adventure with this remarkable man. Other followers bid Jesus and the disciples farewell from the shore, perhaps still pondering the parables they had heard throughout the day. The kingdom of heaven is like. These words would linger in their hearts as they returned to their homes, planting seeds of truth that would grow in ways they couldn't yet imagine. As the boat pushed away from shore, Jesus settled into the stern. A small cushion was placed there, nothing luxurious, just a simple comfort for the teacher's rest. Several of the disciples took up the oars, their strong arms working in rhythmic unison to guide the vessel forward. Others perhaps sat quietly, watching the shoreline recede or gazing up at the vast canvas of sky that was beginning to transition from azure blue to deepening indigo. The evening air was cool against their skin, a welcome relief after the heat of the day. Birds wheeled overhead, their silhouettes dark against the warming colours of sunset. Fish occasionally broke the surface of the water, creating ripples that expanded outward in perfect circles. All seemed peaceful, all seemed well. Jesus, his body surrendering to weariness, closed his eyes. The gentle rocking of the boat, the quiet splash of water against its sides, the distant calls of birds, these formed a lullaby that invited rest. And so he slept, his head resting on the cushion, his breath falling into the deep, steady rhythm of slumber. The disciples continued their work, some rowing, others perhaps talking quietly among themselves about the day's events. What did the Master mean by this parable or that? How had he known what was in the heart of the Pharisee who had challenged him? Would they truly understand all these mysteries someday, as he had promised? As twilight deepened into dusk, stars began to appear overhead. First one, then dozens, then hundreds, until the sky above was spangled with light. On any other night, this might have been a moment of transcendent beauty, a reminder of God's promise to Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as these very stars. But those with experience on these waters noticed something concerning. The air had changed, becoming charged with an expectancy that seasoned fishermen recognized. A slight shift in the wind's direction, a subtle change in temperature, small signs that spoke volumes to those who knew how to read them. Peter exchanged glances with Andrew, then with James. No words were needed between men who had spent their lives on these waters. Something was coming. The sea, now growing restless beneath them, had secrets to tell. Yet Jesus slept on, his face peaceful in the gathering darkness. Did the disciples consider waking him then, when the first signs appeared? Did they debate among themselves whether to alert their teacher to the changing conditions? We don't know. Perhaps they chose to let him rest, confident in their own abilities to handle whatever came. Perhaps they thought the signs would come to nothing. As the boat continued its journey across the darkening waters, the shoreline they had left grew distant, a thin line of shadow against the night sky. Ahead lay their destination, the country of the Gerasenes, but it remained out of sight, beyond the curve of the horizon. They were in the middle space now, too far from where they had been to return quickly, not yet close enough to where they were going to find shelter. It is in these middle spaces of our lives that storms often find us. Not when we're safely harboured, not when we've reached our destination, but in the vulnerable in-between, in the waiting, in the journeying, in the not yet there. The disciples could not know what lay ahead, but Jesus did. His rest was not the ignorant sleep of one caught unaware, but the peaceful repose of one who knows the end from the beginning. In this, there is profound comfort for us tonight as we rest. Whatever journey we're on, whatever middle space we find ourselves in, Jesus knows. He has already seen what we have not yet encountered. As our minds begin to slow and our bodies relax into this moment of rest, let us picture ourselves in that boat. Feel the gentle rocking beneath you. Hear the quiet splash of water against wood. See the stars appearing one by one in the vast expanse above, and know that Jesus is there with you, perfectly at peace even as the first winds of change begin to stir. It began with a whisper, a subtle change in the rhythm of the night. The stars that had shone so brightly overhead began to disappear, one by one, as clouds moved across the sky like silent spectators gathering for some celestial event. The gentle lapping of water against the sides of the boat grew more insistent, less soothing. The disciples, some of whom may have been drifting towards sleep themselves, grew more alert, their senses heightened by years of experience on these unpredictable waters. The Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Gennesaret or the Sea of Tiberias, sits more than 600 feet below sea level, nestled in a basin surrounded by mountains. This unique geography creates a natural phenomenon well known to local fishermen. When cool air from the Mediterranean Sea, about 30 miles to the west, collides with the hot, humid air over the lake, sudden and violent storms can emerge with startling speed. This night would prove no exception to that natural law. One moment, the disciples were crossing in relative calm. The next, they found themselves battling a windstorm that seemed to descend upon them from nowhere. The Greek word used in Mark's Gospel to describe this storm is laelaps. Not a gentle rain shower or passing breeze, but a furious squall, a tempest of frightening power. The wind began to howl, no longer a whisper but a roar that filled their ears and made conversation nearly impossible. It seized the sail, straining the ropes that secured it, and threatening to tear the fabric from its moorings. Those disciples with seafaring experience would have worked quickly to secure what they could, their hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the growing chaos. Waves rose around them, no longer gentle undulations but angry mountains of water that lifted the boat high before dropping it with stomach-churning speed into the next trough. Water began to break over the sides, soaking the men to their skin and pooling at their feet. In the dim light of whatever lamps they might have had, or perhaps by now extinguished by wind and water, they could see the boat beginning to fill. For modern readers, it might be difficult to fully appreciate the terror of this moment. We who cross oceans in massive ships or fly above the clouds in airplanes may have experienced turbulence or rough seas, but few of us have truly feared for our lives while travelling. These men, however, even those who had spent their lives on the water, understood their mortality with stark clarity in this moment. The boat was filling with water faster than they could bail it out. The wind showed no signs of abating. The shore was nowhere in sight. In the ancient world where swimming was not a commonly taught skill, and where the depths of the sea represented chaos and death, their situation was dire indeed. And Jesus slept on, his head still resting on the cushion in the stern of the boat. This image of Christ sleeping peacefully while chaos rages is one of the most powerful in all of Scripture. There is something almost incongruous about it, something that both confounds and comforts. The disciples must have looked at him with bewilderment. How could anyone sleep through such a storm? Did he not feel the water soaking his garments? Did he not hear the howling wind, or feel the violent pitching of the vessel? Perhaps some of them remembered the words of Psalm 121. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Yet here was their teacher, their master, whom some had begun to believe might be the promised Messiah, deep in slumber while destruction seemed imminent. We might pause here in our meditation and consider times when God has seemed silent or sleeping in our own lives. Those dark nights when prayers appear to go unanswered. Those seasons of suffering when heaven itself seems shut tight. Those moments when we cry out, "Lord, don't you care?" For this was precisely the question that rose to the disciples' lips as fear gave way to desperation. Someone, we don't know who, moved to the stern where Jesus lay sleeping. Perhaps they shook his shoulder roughly, the protocol of respect forgotten in the face of survival's urgency. "Teacher," they cried, their voices barely audible above the storm's rage, "don't you care if we drown?" There is raw humanity in this question, the unfiltered cry of those who feel abandoned in their hour of greatest need. It's not a theologian's careful inquiry or a philosopher's pondering, but the gut-level response of frightened men who cannot understand why the one they've come to trust seems indifferent to their plight. Don't you care? How many times have these words formed in human hearts across the centuries? The parent kneeling by the bed of a suffering child, the widow standing by a fresh grave, the refugee fleeing violence with nothing but the clothes on their back, the addict fighting for sobriety and failing again. Lord, don't you care? It's worth noting that the disciples didn't question Jesus' ability to help. They questioned his concern, his heart. They believed he could do something. Why else wake him? But they wondered if he would. Did their plight move him? Did their fear matter to him? Was he as invested in their well-being as they had come to believe? In asking this question, they revealed something profound about the nature of faith. True faith isn't just believing that God can, it's trusting that God will, that his heart is good, that his love is sure, that his timing is perfect. And this is often where our faith is tested most severely. not in questioning God's power, but in questioning his character, his concern, his care. As we continue to settle into rest tonight, let's acknowledge any storms that may be raging in our own lives. Perhaps there are circumstances that have caused us to wonder if God sees, if God cares. Like the disciples, we may have experienced moments of feeling alone in the tempest, questioning whether our prayers are heard. The beauty of this story, and the comfort it offers us even now, is that Jesus' response to their cry reveals the truth about his heart. But before we explore that response, let's sit for a moment with the reality of the storm itself. Feel the wind's force, hear its howl, see the waves crashing over the sides of the boat. Experience the fear, the confusion, the desperate cry for help, and know that in the midst of it all, Jesus is present, not distant, not removed, but right there in the boat with them, with us. Whatever storm we face, we do not face it alone. The Lord of all creation has chosen to journey with us, to be present with us in every turbulent moment and every threatening circumstance. As our breathing deepens and our bodies grow heavier with approaching sleep, let us find comfort in this reality. The presence of Jesus in our boat does not exempt us from storms, but it changes everything about how we experience them. He's here even when he appears to be sleeping. He hears even when he seems silent. And he will respond in his perfect time with his perfect power. Now, as we picture the disciples crowding around Jesus, as we hear their cry of "Don't you care if we drown?" let us watch and see what happens next, for the storm is about to meet its match. The chaos is about to encounter its creator. The winds and waves are about to recognize the voice of the one who called them into being. Jesus woke to the violent pitching of the boat, to the spray of water across his face, to the desperate cries of his disciples. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Their question hung in the air between them, nearly lost in the howling of the wind, yet impossibly loud in its implication. Did he care? Could they truly doubt this? He who had healed the sick, restored sight to the blind, cleansed the lepers, did they think his compassion extended only to strangers and not to those closest to him? He who had called them by name, who had shared meals and long roads and countless conversations with them, did they imagine his heart was indifferent to their fear? Yet Jesus did not respond to their question directly. He did not immediately reassure them of his care or explain his apparent indifference. Instead, he rose, calm, unhurried, sovereign, and turned his attention to the storm itself. Mark's Gospel tells us that he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." The Greek phrase used here, siopa pephimoso, carries the sense of be silent, be muzzled. It is the language one might use to quiet a disruptive animal or silence a disturbing noise. There is authority in these words, command and expectation of immediate obedience, and obey they did. The wind, which had been screaming across the water with destructive force, died away at once. The waves, which had been crashing over the sides of the boat and threatening to sink it, flattened into submission. The entire chaotic scene transformed in an instant from deadly peril to perfect calm. Imagine witnessing this moment. 1 second, you're fighting for your life against one of nature's most terrifying displays of power. The next, you're floating on a sea as smooth as glass under a clearing sky. The contrast would be disorienting, almost unbelievable. The silence following such tumult would ring in your ears. The stillness after such violent motion would leave you feeling strangely weightless. Only then, after demonstrating his authority over creation itself, did Jesus turn back to his disciples, and his words to them were not what they might have expected. No warm reassurance that yes, of course he cared, no gentle understanding of their fear, Instead, he asked them two pointed questions. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? These questions weren't meant to shame or condemn. Jesus was not expressing disappointment so much as issuing an invitation to examine the gap between what they professed to believe about him and how they responded when those beliefs were tested by circumstance. The first question, why are you so afraid, invites examination of the source of our fears. Fear often arises from a perception of threat coupled with a sense of powerlessness to address that threat. The disciples feared drowning because they perceived the storm's power and recognized their inability to control it. But Jesus was suggesting another perspective. When he is in our boat, the equation changes. The presence of the Creator fundamentally alters the balance of power in any situation. The second question, do you still have no faith, probes even deeper. These disciples had witnessed Jesus perform miracle after miracle. They had seen him heal diseases medicine couldn't touch. They had watched him cast out demons that had tormented their victims for years. They had even seen him challenge the religious authorities of their day with an authority that clearly came from above. Yet when the storm came, when their own lives were threatened, their faith faltered. They reverted to fear rather than resting in confidence that the God who had demonstrated his power in so many other circumstances remained just as powerful in their present crisis. This is a common human pattern, isn't it? We can intellectually believe in God's power and love. We can recall times when we've experienced his faithfulness. We can even testify to others about how he has worked in our lives. But when new challenges arise, particularly ones that feel overwhelming or threatening, we can forget everything we know and surrender to panic. Jesus' questions invite a different response. They challenge us to align our emotional reactions with our professed beliefs, to allow what we know about God's character to inform how we feel when facing life's storms. This is not about denying fear. Fear is a natural human emotion that even Jesus experienced in the Garden of Gethsemane. Rather, it's about preventing fear from distorting our view of God and his activity in our lives. The disciples' fear had led them to question Jesus' care for them. Don't you care if we drown? His questions in return invited them to question their fear instead. Was it consistent with what they knew of him? Was it justified in light of who he had revealed himself to be? As we continue our journey toward rest tonight, these questions can guide our own reflection. What fears keep us awake at night? What storms in our lives have made us wonder if God cares? And more importantly, what do we know about the character of Jesus that might speak to those fears? If Jesus is truly who Scripture reveals him to be, all-powerful yet deeply compassionate, sovereign yet intimately involved, holy yet merciful, then our fears must be evaluated in light of these truths. Not dismissed or denied, but placed within the larger context of who God is and how he works. The disciples in that boat had to reconcile their experience of the storm with their experience of Jesus' power over it. We too must reconcile our experience of life's challenges with our understanding of God's character and capabilities. This reconciliation doesn't happen once and for all. It's an ongoing process, a continued growth in trust that develops as we walk with him through both calm seas and raging tempests. Perhaps the most comforting truth in this entire account is the simple reality that Jesus was in the boat with them. He had said, "Let us go over to the other side, you will," not "let me meet you on the other side," or to try to make it to the other side. When Jesus says, "let us go," he commits to the entire journey, not just the destination. Similarly, when Jesus calls us to follow him, he doesn't promise absence of storms. He doesn't guarantee that the path will be smooth or the journey comfortable. What he does promise is his presence with us in whatever we face. "I am with you always," he would later tell his followers, "to the very end of the age." This presence changes everything. It doesn't always change our circumstances, though sometimes, as in this story, it dramatically does. But it always changes the meaning of those circumstances and how we can respond to them. As we feel sleep drawing nearer, let us rest in this truth. Whatever storm we face, Jesus is in our boat, not as a passive passenger, but as the Lord of wind and wave, the one whose word can transform chaos into calm, the one whose presence transforms our fear into faith. The question Jesus asks, "Why are you so afraid?" isn't meant to dismiss our feelings, but to direct our focus toward the greater reality of his presence and power. The perfect love he embodies casts out fear, not by pretending the storm doesn't exist, but by reminding us that he exists within the storm with us, and that makes all the difference. In the aftermath of the storm's sudden cessation, a profound silence settled over the Sea of Galilee. The only sounds remaining might have been the gentle lapping of now calm waters against the boat's hull, the dripping of seawater from soaked clothing and hair, and perhaps the still rapid breathing of men whose hearts had not yet caught up with the dramatic change in their circumstances. The contrast could not have been more stark. Moments before, chaos had reigned, wind howling, waves crashing, men shouting in fear. Now, perfect stillness surrounded them. The sky was clearing, stars reappearing like hesitant witnesses emerging after danger has passed. The sea, which had threatened to claim their lives, now cradled their boat with gentle care. In this strange new quiet, Jesus' words hung in the air. "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" These questions weren't harsh or condemning. They were asked by the same voice that had just commanded the elements and been instantly obeyed. They were spoken by the same lips that had taught multitudes about the kingdom of heaven, that had pronounced forgiveness to the repentant, that had offered living water to the thirsty. His tone may have been one of genuine curiosity rather than criticism, a teacher using a powerful experiential lesson to reveal what was in his students' hearts. The disciples' reaction to this moment is profoundly revealing. Mark tells us that they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." This was a new kind of fear, not the desperate fear of drowning that had gripped them during the storm, but the reverent awe that comes from encountering something, someone, beyond human comprehension. Their question, "Who is this?" is perhaps the most important question any person can ask about Jesus. It's a question that has echoed through centuries across cultures within countless human hearts. Who is this man who spoke with unparalleled authority, who healed with a touch, who forgave sins as if they were his to forgive, and who, as they had just witnessed, commanded the very elements of nature with a word? The disciples had already seen Jesus perform many miracles. They had watched him heal sickness, cast out demons, even restore withered limbs. But this display of power struck them differently, perhaps because it touched so directly on their own expertise. Peter, Andrew, James, John, these were fishermen who had spent their lives on this very sea. They knew its moods and dangers. They had weathered storms before through their own skill and experience. But they had never seen anyone simply speak to a storm and have it obey. Their question reveals something profound about spiritual growth. Revelation comes in layers. We don't grasp the full reality of who Jesus is all at once. Even those who walked with him physically, who ate with him and listened to his teaching daily, came to understand his identity gradually, through accumulated experiences and progressive revelation. This moment on the sea represented a significant shift in their understanding. The Jesus they thought they knew, teacher, healer, friend, suddenly revealed himself to be Lord of creation itself. The one who had been sleeping on a cushion moments before now stood before them as the one who held authority over the very forces of nature. "Who is this?" they asked each other. They were beginning to realize that the answer was far more profound, far more cosmic, far more divine than they had previously imagined. This question invites us into our own reflection tonight. Who is Jesus to us? Is he simply a wise teacher whose moral guidance we appreciate? A historical figure who founded a religion? A comforting presence when life gets difficult? Or is he the sovereign Lord of all creation, whose authority extends over every aspect of our existence, from the largest cosmic forces to the smallest details of our daily lives? Our answer to this question shapes everything about our faith journey. If Jesus is merely a good teacher, then his words are suggestions we can take or leave. If he is simply a historical religious figure, then his relevance to our modern lives may be limited. But if he is who he claimed to be, the Son of God, one with the Father, the Word made flesh, then every word he spoke carries divine authority. Every promise he made is utterly trustworthy, and every command he gave deserves our complete obedience. The disciples in that boat were confronting this reality in a visceral, immediate way. That Jesus they thought they knew had just done something only God could do. The Psalms describe God as the One who stilled the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves. Psalm 65:7, and the one who stilled the storm to a whisper, the waves of the sea were hushed. Psalm 107:29. Now they had seen Jesus do exactly this, with their own eyes in their own boat, in response to their own cry for help. Their question, "Who is this?" was not merely rhetorical. It reflected genuine wrestling with an expanding understanding of Jesus' identity. And this wrestling is an essential part of authentic faith. God does not expect us to have perfect theological understanding from the beginning of our journey with him. He reveals himself to us gradually, meeting us where we are and gently expanding our capacity to know him as he truly is. For the disciples, this storm became a classroom, a place where their understanding of Jesus grew deeper and wider. Similarly, the storms of our lives often become the context in which we come to know God more truly. It's relatively easy to affirm God's goodness when life is calm and comfortable. It's when the winds howl and the waves threaten that our true understanding of his character is both revealed and refined. As we continue our journey towards sleep tonight, let's allow this holy question to linger in our minds. Who is this Jesus? Not as an abstract theological inquiry, but as a personal exploration of relationship. Who is he to me? What have I seen him do in my life? How has my understanding of him grown through seasons of both calm and storm? The beauty of this story is that it invites us to know Jesus more fully, not just as a distant miracle worker, but as the one who journeys with us through every circumstance of life. He is in our boat. He may sometimes appear to be sleeping, but he is never absent, never unaware, never unconcerned. And when he speaks, whether to rebuke a storm or to question our fear, his words carry the authority of the one who created all things and holds all things together. The wind and waves recognize his voice, because they came into being through that same voice. All things were created through him and for him, Paul would later write to the Colossians. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Colossians 1:16-15. This is the Jesus who accompanies us through every storm. This is the one who has promised never to leave us or forsake us. This is the Lord who may ask us, as he asked his first disciples, "Why are you so afraid?" Not to shame us for our fear, but to invite us into deeper trust based on deeper knowledge of who he truly is. As our bodies grow heavier with approaching sleep, as our thoughts begin to slow and quiet, let us rest in this profound truth. The one who commands the wind and waves is with us. And if even the storm obeys his voice, how much more can we trust him with the circumstances of our lives, with the fears that sometimes keep us awake, with the future that remains unknown to us but is fully known to him? In this trust, we find not just theological truth, but practical peace, the kind of peace that allows us to rest even when circumstances remain uncertain. Jesus didn't promise his disciples a storm-free journey. He promised them his presence through whatever storms might come. He offers us the same today. Who is this? The disciples asked. The answer to that question continues to unfold for all who choose to journey with him, not in abstract propositions, but in lived experience, in daily walking with the one whose authority extends over every realm and whose love reaches into every heart that opens to receive him. As the boat continued its journey across the now peaceful sea, the disciples must have fallen into a contemplative silence. The question they had asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him," would linger in their hearts and minds for days, weeks, perhaps even years to come. Each time they recalled this night, this storm, this miracle, their understanding of Jesus would deepen a little more. This is often how spiritual growth unfolds for us as well. Not primarily through intellectual study, though that has its place, but through lived experiences that reveal God's character and power in ways that transform our understanding. Head knowledge becomes heart knowledge when we see God act in response to our deepest needs and most desperate prayers. The disciples were beginning to grasp something profound. Jesus was not merely with them, he was over all things. His presence in their boat didn't just mean companionship, it meant protection, provision, and peace that transcended circumstances. Even when he appeared to be sleeping, his sovereignty remained active and absolute. As the first light of dawn began to brighten the eastern sky, they could see their destination approaching, the region of the Gerasenes on the opposite shore of the lake. Jesus had said, "Let us go over to the other side," and despite all that had transpired during the night, they were indeed arriving exactly where he had intended to take them. This small detail carries significant comfort. When Jesus sets a destination, he ensures arrival. The storm, powerful as it was, had not prevented the fulfillment of his stated purpose. It had threatened, certainly. It had frightened the disciples badly. But in the end, it had simply become another opportunity for Jesus to reveal more of himself to those who followed him. This pattern appears throughout Scripture and throughout the lives of those who walk with God. What appears to be a detour or a disaster often becomes the very context in which God manifests his glory most clearly. The storm on the sea, the fiery furnace, the lion's den, the prison cell. In Scripture, these became stages for divine revelation, not obstacles to divine purpose. As we prepare to drift into sleep tonight, there is profound rest available in this reality. Whatever storms we face, they do not take Jesus by surprise. Whatever fears arise within us, they do not diminish his power. Whatever threatens to overwhelm us, it cannot overrule his sovereign declaration over our lives. If Jesus has said to us, in any area of our lives, "Let us go to the other side," then we can rest assured that no storm, internal or external, can prevent us from reaching the destination he has established. The journey may include unexpected turbulence. We may experience moments of genuine fear, but the presence of Jesus in our boat, in our lives, our circumstances, our hearts, guarantees safe passage. This doesn't mean we won't get wet, doesn't mean the journey will always feel comfortable or proceed according to our preferred timeline. The disciples in that boat experienced genuine terror before they witnessed miraculous calm. They got soaked to the skin. They may have lost cargo overboard. The boat likely required bailing out and repairs afterward, but they made it to the other side because Jesus had declared that this would be so, and in the process, they came to know him more deeply than they had before. The storm became not an obstacle to their progress, but a vehicle for their spiritual growth. As we reflect on this story one final time tonight, let's consider 3 enduring comforts it offers to all who journey with Jesus. First, Jesus is present in every storm. He may not manifest his power immediately or in the ways we expect, but he's never absent from our struggles. The psalmist wrote, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Psalm 46:1-3. This presence is not just comforting, it is transformative. It changes how we experience our circumstances, even when it doesn't immediately change the circumstances themselves. Second, Jesus' timing is perfect. He allowed the storm to rage for a time before calming it, not because he was indifferent to the disciples' fear, but because the experience would deepen their understanding and strengthen their faith. Similarly, when he seems silent or inactive in our lives, it is never due to indifference. His timing takes into account purposes and perspectives that extend far beyond our immediate comfort, encompassing our long-term growth and God's eternal glory. Third, Jesus' authority is absolute. When he spoke to the wind and waves, they had no choice but to obey. The same voice that said, "Let there be light" at creation, now said, "Be still" to the storm, with the same creative authority and the same immediate result. This ultimate authority means that nothing we face, no circumstance, no enemy, no fear, no failure, is beyond his power to redeem, restore, or transform according to his perfect will. These truths don't eliminate life's storms, but they fundamentally change how we experience them. They allow us to sleep, literally and figuratively, in the sovereignty of the one who has promised to bring us safely to the other side. As your body relaxes more deeply now, as your breathing slows and your thoughts begin to drift, imagine yourself in that boat after the storm has ceased. Feel the gentle rocking of the vessel on calm waters. See the stars reflected on the surface like scattered diamonds. Hear the quiet lapping of small waves against the wooden hull. And most importantly, know that Jesus is there with you, awake, aware, almighty. The night is passing. Dawn approaches. The shore draws nearer with each moment. And the one who commanded the storm with a word continues to hold you in the palm of his hand, guiding your vessel to exactly where he intends it to go. In this assurance there is deep peace. In this knowledge there is perfect rest. In this presence there is complete safety. Whether we find ourselves currently in the midst of a raging storm, in the calm that follows, or in the ordinary moments between dramatic events, the truth remains. Jesus is with us. Jesus is for us, and Jesus will bring us safely to the other side. So breathe deeply now. Release the tension you may be holding in your shoulders, your jaw, your hands, your mind. Allow your body to grow heavy with approaching sleep. In the quiet of this moment, I invite you to find a comfortable position. Perhaps you're already settled in bed, your head resting on your pillow, or maybe you're preparing for rest after a long day. Wherever you are, however you've arrived at this moment, know that you are welcomed here with tenderness and care. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel the weight of your body surrendering to the support beneath you. Notice how your shoulders can soften, how your hands can rest without grasping, how your face can release any tension it's been holding. There's nothing you need to do right now except breathe and listen. Let's breathe together for a moment. Inhale slowly through your nose, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. Hold it gently for just a moment, and then exhale through your mouth, releasing anything that doesn't serve your peace. Inhale comfort. Exhale worry. Inhale divine peace. Exhale human striving. Inhale rest. Exhale burden. With each breath, you're creating space within yourself. Space for stillness, space for quiet, space for the gentle voice that calls you by name. I invite you now to begin visualizing a journey. As you continue breathing slowly and deeply, imagine yourself walking along a narrow country path. It's late afternoon, and the golden light of the setting sun bathes everything in a warm glow. The air is perfect, not too warm, not too cool, and carries the sweet scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. The path winds gently through rolling hills. With each step you feel more of your daily concerns falling away. The emails waiting for responses, the conversations that left you wondering, the tasks still uncompleted, all of these can wait outside this peaceful moment. As you walk, you notice the sound of birdsong in the distance, not the busy chattering songs of morning birds, but the gentle settled sounds of evening, soft calls that seem to whisper, "All is well, rest is coming." The path begins to crest a small hill, and as you reach the top you see before you a wide meadow. The grass sways gently in a soft breeze, creating waves of movement like a green sea. Scattered throughout are wildflowers in gentle hues, pale yellows, soft whites, and tender purples. At the far edge of this meadow, you can just make out the stone walls of an ancient sheepfold, a place of gathering, a place of safety, a place of rest. This is where our journey is taking us tonight, to the sheepfold of the Good Shepherd. As you descend the hill toward the meadow, you feel a sense of being both completely free and completely held. The vast open sky above reminds you of boundless possibility, while the path beneath your feet assures you that you're being guided. With each step, your breathing continues to deepen. Your inhales become fuller, your exhales become longer. Your mind begins to quiet like waters settling after a storm. The path now leads you into the meadow itself. The grass reaches up past your ankles, brushing against you with feather-like touches. You can feel the earth beneath your feet, solid, supportive, ancient. As you walk, you begin to notice the sounds of sheep in the distance, not loud or disturbing, but the gentle bleating that speaks of contentment and security. They're calling to one another as they make their way toward the sheepfold for the night. And then you hear something else, a voice. Low and warm, it carries across the meadow with remarkable clarity. It's not calling to you, not yet, but to the sheep. And you notice how they respond, turning their heads, adjusting their path, moving with purpose toward the voice. This is the voice of the shepherd, calling his sheep to evening rest. Each one knows this voice intimately. Each one trusts this voice implicitly. Each one follows this voice instinctively. As you continue your walk through the meadow, drawn toward the sheepfold just as the sheep are drawn, you begin to feel a sense of recognition stirring within you. Something about this voice awakens a deep memory, not from yesterday or last year, but from the very foundation of your being. It's as if your soul remembers this voice from before time began. The path begins to widen as you near the sheepfold. The stone walls become clearer now, smooth, weathered stones carefully placed one upon another by hands that understood the importance of creating sanctuary. These walls have stood through countless seasons, through rain and wind and snow and sun, remaining steadfast in their purpose, to protect, to shelter, to create a space of safety. As you draw nearer, you see the entrance to the sheepfold, a simple opening in the wall. There is no gate of wood or metal, for in this place, in this story, the shepherd himself serves as the gate. Nothing enters that is not first approved by him. Nothing threatens that is not first faced by him. The voice continues to call, naming each sheep individually, knowing each one's unique needs, tendencies, and nature. And as the sun begins to sink lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the meadow, you find yourself at the entrance to the sheepfold, ready to cross the threshold into deeper rest. As you stand at the entrance to the sheepfold, you pause to take in its simple beauty. The circular stone walls rise about 4 feet high, tall enough to keep the sheep secure, yet low enough that the shepherd can see over them to watch for any approach of danger. The stones themselves seem to hold stories, their surfaces marked by time and weather, yet their arrangement remains sturdy and true. The ground inside the sheepfold has been softened by the passage of countless sheep over many years. What might once have been rocky earth has become a cushioned, almost velvety surface, perfect for rest. In some areas, particularly along the inside edge of the wall, tufts of soft grass have grown, creating natural pillows for weary heads. You notice that while the day remains warm, there is a coolness gathered in the shadows of the walls, a reminder that night approaches and with it the deeper rest that darkness brings. The air here carries a different quality. Sheltered from the breeze that moves across the open meadow, it feels somehow more concentrated, more present. As you step inside, crossing the threshold where the shepherd stands watch, you feel a subtle shift in your awareness. The sounds of the wider world seem to soften. The concerns that normally occupy your thoughts recede further. Here, within these ancient walls, existence becomes simpler. There is no need to navigate complex decisions or manage difficult relationships. There is only the present moment, the approaching night, and the protective presence of the shepherd. You find a place to sit against the wall where the last rays of sunlight still warm the stones. From here, you can watch as the sheep continue to arrive, each responding to its name when called, each receiving a gentle touch from the shepherd as it passes by him into the fold. This is how it has been done for thousands of years in the hill country. This ancient rhythm of call and response, of leaving the wide pastures for the secure fold, of trusting the one who leads and protects. Nothing about this scene would look unfamiliar to someone from centuries past. The relationship between shepherd and sheep transcends time, speaking to something essential about care and trust. In ancient times, you remember hearing, shepherds would often combine their flocks during the day, allowing the sheep to graze together in larger numbers. But when evening came, each shepherd would call only to his own sheep, using distinctive sounds or words that only his flock recognized. Remarkably, the sheep would separate themselves, following only the voice they knew, never confused by the calls of other shepherds. As you observe this evening gathering, you notice the care with which the shepherd examines each sheep as it enters. His hands move gently over wool and skin, checking for injuries or thorns that might have been gathered during the day's wandering. For one sheep, he removes a small burr caught in the thick wool. For another, he applies a soothing balm to a minor scrape. No need goes unnoticed, no discomfort goes untended. The sheep themselves seem to welcome this attention. Though some are clearly tired from the day's grazing, they pause willingly for the shepherd's examination. There is trust in their stillness, contentment in their patience. They know these hands, they know this voice, they know they are cared for individually, specifically, attentively. As the fold fills with more sheep, you notice the distinctive sounds they make. Not the loud bleating of alarm, but the soft, low sounds of recognition and settlement. They are talking to each other and to the shepherd in their own language of belonging. The air begins to cool more noticeably as the sun touches the horizon. Long shadows stretch across the sheepfold, and the stone walls now provide not just security, but shelter from the light evening breeze. The shepherd moves among the gathered sheep, his presence clearly bringing them comfort. Some draw closer to him as he passes, seeking the reassurance of proximity. You watch as he kneels beside one sheep that seems particularly restless. He speaks softly to it, words you cannot quite hear from where you sit, but you can see the effect. The sheep's breathing slows, its movements still, its eyes close in what can only be described as surrender to care. This, you realize, is what true safety looks like. Not the absence of all threat, but the presence of one who is trustworthy enough to allow complete vulnerability. The sheep do not need to remain vigilant because the shepherd stays watchful. They do not need to worry about provision because the shepherd knows where the sweet water flows and the tender grass grows. They do not need to fear the darkness because the shepherd's sight penetrates what they cannot see. As twilight deepens into early evening, a profound quiet descends upon the sheepfold. The activities of the day, the walking, the grazing, the occasional startle running, have given way to stillness. Energy spent has prepared the way for deep restoration. The shepherd now sits at the entrance to the fold, his back against one of the stone walls, his staff across his lap. From this position, he can see both outward across the meadow and inward to the gathered flock. Nothing approaches without his knowledge. Nothing disturbs without his permission. In this ancient pattern, in this timeless scene, you feel your own breathing continuing to slow, your own thoughts continuing to quiet. The simple rightness of this place seeps into your awareness. The stone walls that have sheltered generations, the soft earth that welcomes rest, the attentive presence that makes vulnerability safe. As night begins to embrace the world outside the fold, you feel yourself drawn deeper into the peace of this sanctuary. The voice of the shepherd, which first called across the meadow, now speaks in the silence of complete trust. And though no words are spoken aloud, you understand with perfect clarity. You are known. You are seen. You are safe. As the night deepens around the sheepfold, the stars begin to appear overhead. First one, then another, then suddenly a multitude, transforming the darkness into a vast canvas of light. The shepherd remains at his post, a silhouette of watchful presence against the night sky. In this moment of perfect stillness, words from ancient scripture rise in your mind, words that have brought comfort to countless souls through the centuries. The 10th chapter of John's Gospel, where Jesus describes himself as the Good Shepherd, speaks with particular resonance in this place of safety and rest. Listen now as the words flow gently into your consciousness. Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. Pause and consider this image of the gate. In ancient sheepfolds like this one, the shepherd would often position himself in the opening of the wall, literally becoming the gate. Nothing could enter without passing by him first. No predator could threaten, no thief could steal, no sheep could wander away without encountering the shepherd's watchful presence. Imagine now what it means to have such protection. Not a cold barrier of wood or metal, but a living, attentive guardian who knows each one by name. This is not distant security, but intimate care. This is not impersonal safety, but relationship-based protection. The words continue to unfold. I am the Good Shepherd. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd, and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Reflect on the difference between hired protection and devoted care. The difference is not in skill or strength, but in relationship and commitment. The Good Shepherd's connection to the sheep is not a transaction but a bond. His protection flows not from duty but from love. As you gaze across the sheepfold, you can see this truth embodied in the shepherd's posture, alert but relaxed, vigilant but peaceful. His attention never wavers, yet it carries no tension. This is the watching that comes from love rather than obligation. The sacred text continues, I am the Good Shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. Imagine being known, fully known, and still loved without hesitation. Not the surface knowing of casual acquaintance, but the deep knowing that sees every fear, every hope, every quiet corner of your heart. The shepherd knows when you are afraid, when you are lonely, when you are in pain. He knows when you have wandered, when you have stumbled, when you have fallen, and still he calls your name with tenderness. This knowing is not one-directional. The sheep also know their shepherd. They recognize his voice among all others. They trust his guidance without question. They follow his leading with confidence because experience has taught them that he brings them to good places, to fresh water, to green pastures, to safe rest. As these words settle into your spirit, another passage emerges. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. There is a certainty in these words, a promise of security that transcends physical safety. The shepherd's care extends beyond the immediate dangers of wolves and thieves to the deeper threats of meaninglessness and separation. His protection covers not just the body but the soul. His provision satisfies not just physical hunger, but spiritual longing. As you reflect on these words, you notice the sheep in the fold have arranged themselves in a pattern that seems both random and intentional. Some cluster together for warmth, others maintain a small space of separation. Some lie with their heads toward the centre, others face the walls. Each has found the position that brings them comfort, yet all remain within the protective circle of the shepherd's care. Is this not a beautiful picture of community within security? Unity without uniformity? Each sheep is different, in size, in age, in temperament, yet all are equally valued, equally protected, equally known by name. The night has fully embraced the world now. The meadow beyond the sheepfold lies invisible in darkness, but here within the circle of stone walls there is no fear of what cannot be seen. The shepherd's presence transforms the night from a time of vulnerability to a season of rest. One more passage rises in your awareness. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. These words speak of expansion, of inclusion, of a circle of care that continues to widen. The shepherd's heart is not limited to those already gathered, but extends to those still wandering, still searching, still unsure of where they belong. As you let these ancient words settle deeply into your consciousness, you notice that the rhythm of your breathing is synchronized with the gentle rise and fall of the sleeping sheep around you. There is a harmony here, a natural community formed not by effortful connection, but by shared trust in the one who watches over all. The shepherd's eyes meet yours across the sheepfold, and in that glance you understand you too are invited into this circle of care. You too are known by name. You too are welcome to rest under the watchflies of the one who never slumbers. As the night grows deeper, something remarkable happens. The scene around you begins to shift, not in a jarring way, but with the gentle transformation of a dream unfolding. The walls of the sheepfold seem to dissolve, and you find yourself no longer sitting against the stones, but standing in an open field just as dawn begins to break on the horizon. The sheep are rising from their rest, stretching and shaking the night stillness from their bodies. The shepherd moves among them, speaking softly to each one, calling names that sound like music in the morning air. He turns to you now, his eyes finding yours with a gaze that feels at once ancient and immediate. With a small gesture of his hand, he invites you to join him as he prepares to lead the flock to fresh pastures. You rise and move toward him, feeling neither rushed nor hesitant. There is a rightness to this moment, as if it has been waiting for you through all the days of your life. Come, he says, his voice both gentler and more compelling than you imagined. Walk with me a while. As the sheep begin to follow the shepherd out into the wider fields, you find yourself walking alongside him. Not ahead, not behind, but beside, close enough to hear his breathing, to notice the deliberate placement of his feet on the earth, to feel the subtle movements of the air as he lifts his staff to guide the way. The morning unfolds around you in a symphony of sensory experiences. The earth beneath your feet feels solid yet yielding, supporting each step without resistance. The cool morning air carries the mingled scents of grass, wild flowers, and the earthy wool of the sheep. Light increases gradually as the sun climbs higher, illuminating the landscape in stages, first outlining the hills in gold, then filling the valleys with amber light, finally bathing everything in the clear radiance of full morning. You notice that the shepherd does not hurry. His pace is steady but unhurried, considerate of the youngest lambs and the oldest ewes. There is no sense of urgency, no anxiety about reaching a destination by a certain time. The journey itself holds as much importance as the arrival. The sheep need movement, the shepherd explains, seeming to read your thoughts, but they also need to feel secure in that movement. Too fast and they become anxious. Too slow and they begin to wander. The right pace creates both progress and peace. As you walk, you begin to notice how the sheep respond to the shepherd's voice. When he calls to one that has strayed too near a thorny thicket, it immediately adjusts its path. When he makes a particular clicking sound, the entire flock knows to pause and wait. When he sings a low melodic note, they gather more tightly together. They know my voice, he says simply. Not just its sound, but its meaning. The path begins to ascend a gentle hill. As you climb, you notice how the shepherd positions himself, sometimes ahead to lead the way, sometimes behind to encourage those who lag, sometimes at the side to prevent wandering toward unseen dangers. The greatest deception, he comments, is the belief that freedom means absence of guidance. True freedom comes from trusting the one who sees what you cannot see. From the top of the hill, you can see the landscape spread out in all directions. To the east, where you've come from, the sheepfold stands solid and familiar. To the west, your direction of travel, a wide valley opens up, green with the new grass and dotted with the blue of morning flowers. To the north and south, other hills rise, creating a natural corridor for your journey. The shepherd pauses here, allowing the sheep to rest for a moment and take in the wider view. He stands slightly apart, his eyes scanning the horizon with attentive care. You understand that he is looking for signs of danger, assessing weather patterns, planning the safest route forward. Every step we take has been imagined before we take it, he says, again responding to your unspoken thoughts. I walk these paths in my mind before I walk them with my feet. That is how I can lead with confidence even into new territories. As the journey resumes, you begin to notice the distinct personalities of the sheep around you. Some walk with the confidence of experience, staying close to the shepherd out of choice rather than fear. Others move with the uncertainty of youth, sometimes darting ahead, sometimes falling behind, requiring more of the shepherd's attention. One sheep in particular catches your notice and slightly smaller than the others, with a slight limp that suggests an old injury. This one stays especially close to the shepherd, often walking directly beside him on the opposite side from where you walk. This one knows her need, the shepherd says, his voice warm with affection. She learned through difficulty what some never learn through ease, that proximity to me is better than independence from me. The sun is higher now, warming the air and bringing out the sweet scent of the crushed grass beneath your feet. The path descends into the valley, where a small stream cuts through the field, creating a natural stopping place. The sheep move eagerly toward the water, their thirst evident in their quickened pace. The shepherd guides them to the calmest part of the stream, where the water flows gently and the banks slope gradually. Here the sheep can drink without danger, refreshing themselves in the clear water. You kneel beside the stream yourself, cupping your hands to bring the cool water to your lips. It tastes sweeter than any water you've known before, clean and life-giving. Rest here a while, the shepherd says, settling himself on a smooth rock nearby. The journey continues, but never without restoration along the way. As you sit by the stream, watching the sheep drink and then begin to graze on the lush grass that grows along the banks, you feel a profound sense of being exactly where you are meant to be. There is no striving in this moment, no anxiety about what comes next, no regret about what came before. There is only the present reality of being on the path with the shepherd, moving at his pace, resting at his direction, continuing under his care. The soft sound of the stream, the gentle movements of the grazing sheep, the watchful presence of the shepherd, all combine to create a sense of security so deep that you feel your entire being relaxing into it. This is what it means to be truly led, truly guided, truly known. As the sun reaches its zenith, bathing the valley in golden light, you close your eyes for a moment, allowing the warmth to wash over you. In this perfect stillness, you hear the shepherd's voice once more, not speaking to the sheep now, but to you. The path continues beyond what you can see, but do not be anxious about what lies ahead. I have walked it already. I know every turn, every hill, every valley, and I will never lead you anywhere that I have not prepared for you. As the afternoon light begins to soften, casting longer shadows across the valley, you open your eyes to find the shepherd standing before you, his hand extended in invitation. "Come," he says simply. "There is something I want to show you before the day ends." You rise and follow him, noticing that the sheep have settled into a gentle rhythm of grazing. They seem content to remain in this lush valley for now, secure in the knowledge that the shepherd remains near. He leads you to a small rise overlooking the stream, where a single tree offers dappled shade. Its branches spread wide, creating a natural canopy that filters the sunlight into patterns of gold and shadow on the ground below. "Sit with me here," he says, settling himself against the trunk of the tree. As you join him in the shade, you realise you can see the entire flock from this vantage point. Every sheep is visible, from the confident leaders to the hesitant followers, from the strong to the vulnerable. The shepherd's gaze moves over them with attentive care, missing nothing. "Do you see how they graze without fear?" he asks. "They do not worry about predators or storms or scarcity. They have learned through experience that I provide what they need. I protect them from what would harm them. I guide them to places of abundance." You watch as the sheep move slowly through the grass, stopping to eat, occasionally looking up to confirm the shepherd's presence, then returning to their grazing with peaceful assurance. "This is the gift I offer," the shepherd continues, "not the absence of all danger, but the presence of constant care, not the elimination of all difficulty, but the assurance of never facing it alone. Particularly small lamb catches your attention. It must be one of the newest born to the flock. It stays close to its mother, occasionally frolicking in short bursts of energy before returning to her side. Its wool is especially white, almost luminous in the afternoon light. The youngest ones," the shepherd observes, following your gaze, "sometimes need to be carried. When the path grows steep or the day grows long, I lift them into my arms and bear their weight. They learn trust through being held." You consider this, the image of the strong shepherd carrying the vulnerable lamb, not with impatience at its weakness, but with tenderness for its need. "Do you know," he asks, turning to look directly at you, "that I would leave the 99 to find the one? If a single sheep wanders away, becomes lost, falls into danger, I go after it, not because it is more valuable than the others, but because each one is irreplaceable to me. Each one is known by name. Each one matters uniquely." The depth of commitment in his voice moves you deeply. This is not the impersonal care of a distant guardian, but the passionate attention of one who loves specifically, individually, completely. The good shepherd, he continues, lays down his life for the sheep, not because the sheep have earned such sacrifice, but because the shepherd's love makes them worth any cost. As he speaks these words, the light shifts, taking on the golden quality of late afternoon. The air grows still, as if the world itself is listening to this truth. Many voices will call to you, the shepherd says softly. Some offering easier paths, some promising quicker rewards, some threatening what will happen if you don't follow them. But remember, my sheep know my voice. They recognize it among all others because they have spent time listening, because they have experienced its reliability, because they have found that following it always leads to life. He reaches out and places his hand on your shoulder, the weight of it both grounding and reassuring. You are not alone in the fields of this world, he says. Even when you cannot see me, I am watching. Even when you cannot hear me clearly, I am speaking. Even when you wander, I am seeking. This is the promise I make to each one who belongs to me. You will never be forgotten, never be abandoned, never be left without guidance. The sun is beginning its descent toward the horizon now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Soon it will be time to lead the sheep back to the safety of the fold for the night. Trust and rest, the shepherd says, his voice a gentle command. These are the twins of peace. Trust that I know the way forward. Rest in the knowledge that you are watched over. Together they create a quiet heart even in the midst of a noisy world. As these words settle into your spirit, you notice that your breathing has slowed to match the shepherd's. Deep, unhurried breaths that seem to draw peace directly from the air around you. Your body feels heavy with relaxation, as if every muscle has decided at once to release its tension. The voice of love is always near, the shepherd murmurs, his words becoming almost musical in their rhythm. Calling you by name, inviting you to follow, promising presence through every valley and on every mountain top. The sheep are beginning to gather more closely now, sensing the approaching evening. Their movements become slower, their grazing more intermittent. They are preparing for the journey back to the fold. Step by step, you are led to peace, the shepherd continues, his voice growing softer, not in great leaps or sudden flights, but in the patient unfolding of a path walked in trust. Each day has its portion of guidance, each moment carries its own light. He rises now, stretching his arms wide as if to embrace the entire flock at once. The setting sun behind him creates a halo effect, illuminating his outline with golden light. It is time to return to the fold, he says, extending his hand to help you rise. The day's journey concludes, but the care never ends. Through the night I watch, through the darkness I guard. When morning comes again, we continue the path together. As you stand, you feel a profound sense of renewal, as if the simple act of walking with the shepherd, listening to his voice, observing his care for the sheep has restored something essential within you. The worries that had weighed on your mind seem distant now, replaced by a calm certainty that you are known, you are valued, you are guided. The shepherd lifts his voice in a distinctive call that immediately draws the attention of every sheep. They respond with remarkable unity, moving toward him from all directions, gathering into a more cohesive group for the journey home. This is how it has always been, he explains as you begin to walk beside him, the flock following behind. The sheep scattered in feeding, gathered in travelling, diverse in their individual needs, united in their common trust, each one unique, yet part of a greater whole. The path back to the sheepfold seems somehow shorter than the journey out, as if the familiarity of returning home compresses distance itself. The evening light casts long shadows ahead of you, leading the way toward rest. You're safe, the shepherd says, his voice now barely above a whisper. You're loved. You're guided. These words repeat like a gentle refrain as you walk, matching the rhythm of your steps, synchronizing with your heartbeat. They are not just sounds but promises, not just comfort but truth. They sink deeply into your consciousness, creating a foundation of peace that feels both new and somehow always known. As the sheepfold comes into view, its stone walls glowing with the last light of day, you feel a sense of completion. Not the end of a glory, but the closing of a circle that will open again with the dawn. The shepherd leads the flock through the entrance, counting each one, greeting each by name, ensuring that all who went out have returned safely. When the last sheep has entered the fold, the shepherd takes his place at the gateway, his staff across his knees, his gaze moving between the gathered flock and the darkening landscape beyond. He is the living gate, the constant guardian, the embodiment of care that does not slumber or sleep. Rest now, he says to you, his eyes holding yours with gentle intensity. The shepherd knows your name. The shepherd calls you to rest. The voice of love is always near. As night embraces the world once more, as stars begin to appear in the darkening sky, you feel yourself surrounded by perfect peace, held in the care of the one who calls you by name, who leads you beside still waters, who restores your soul. In this sanctuary of trust, sleep comes not as escape but as gift, not as absence but as presence in the watchful love of the Good Shepherd. Thank you for joining me on this peaceful journey with the Good Shepherd. If these words have brought you comfort tonight, please consider subscribing to Sacred Rest for more scripture-inspired sleep stories. And I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. May you rest deeply in the knowledge that you are watched over with perfect care through this night and always.